Welcome to another episode of the Anxious Marketers podcast. You have me, Hannah, and Mia, as always, and we have a very special guest today. Casie Shimansky has decided to join us for a casual conversation about her experience in marketing. She's worked a long time in the creative space, so we're so excited to have her on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're so excited. You're one of the first people I thought of just because Casie and I and Hannah, we all used to work at the same company together. Yeah, really excited to have you on the show. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how you got started
Absolutely.
in marketing?
Yeah, I love the fact that I was one of the first people you thought of when you thought anxious marketers. It's just-
We should have called it empathetic marketers because you get
well,
it. Yeah.
well, anxious usually leads to a pretty solid dose of empathy. Because you kind of know
True.
how it goes. You're a feeler, so that happens. But yeah, I have been even before I was in marketing. I guess I've been in marketing. But I started as a photographer. I owned my own company photographing weddings for a very long time until I wanted a 401k. And so I had to go to corporate America for that. And so I actually wound up in social media pretty early before the term early adopter was a thing. I was in social media, which probably ages me now, and really got my start there. Kind of came up. That was sort of my college. Like Twitter felt like college at the time with a
Oh
bunch
my
of us
gosh.
just learning from each other, growing from each other, going to different conferences, meeting each other. And I met quite a few friends there actually at a conference. And one of them happened to be a lead at who became my boss at Cisco. She tapped me on the shoulder. She had been a good friend for quite some time and said, "Do you want to come do this thing over here?" And I was all in, was super excited, helped to grow their employer brand strategy, was there for 7 years. And we took them to number one, world's best workplace, which was a lot of fun and really did social media, content strategy, and storytelling. So I also led the We Are Cisco blog for most of the time that I was there. And then another friend I met at that same conference tapped on the shoulder to join everyone where we were at for Stacks. And so he asked if I would like to lead the creative and brand team. And so jumped in on that. It was a no brainer. And now I'm doing something else.
I actually because of all of your creative work, it was like Stacks looks like such a cool place to work. I wanted to work at Stacks because of your creative direction. So I just think that's so
It worked.
yeah, it's very cool. Very yes, it did. It worked.
And a lot of that was just us really wanting to, I mean, that goes back into sort of my employer brand brain of really the products are great, but without the people, you don't have any products. So you really need to tell those stories of the people who are creating for your company, and getting to do that for all of the companies I've been with recently has been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember one of the first actual conversations we had, Casie, was at Topgolf, and I was like, "How did you become a creative director?" Because that side of marketing just sets my soul on fire. So I've always really admired the work that you did and being able to, go to work every day and tell a story or create a story is so cool. So I really admire you for that. And you did a really good job at Stack.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
You made
Uh,
payments processing fun and colorful. So going back to, with how you said you started out in photography. Was that your first job or what was your first job
My very
ever?
first job, I will
I
say
love this
I
question.
was also a writer. I mean, from the time that, someone handed me a pencil and taught me how to lace words together, I was always telling stories and writing. And yeah, to this day, people are like, "When's the book coming out?"
Working on
Books take
it.
time. Yeah, we're working
Yeah.
on it. Being an anxious creative, just like,
Yeah, right.
because then you have to put the book out and you have to see what people like about it, or
And that it's done.
creating for yourself, that'd be one thing,
Mhm.
but you have to put it out there and then people have to comment on it, which is just the torturous part. But yeah, my very first job was actually working at a bagel shop. Yeah, just doing my thing as a 16-year-old. Um,
Yeah.
and then shortly thereafter, I was a lifeguard at Disney World for
Oh.
about a year.
That's
So yeah,
awesome.
being in Orlando, worked at all the theme parks, all there was a public
What it
stink
is.
stint in there, yeah, all the key players
Yeah.
there. So my background really up until 2015 was also in hospitality. Wasn't really in like I did not go to school to become a marketer. That very first social media job, I remember like the day I was like, "Oh, I'm a marketer. Oh, okay, that's a social media marketing. Okay." So, like
Right.
the dots started to kind of click for me because I didn't go to school for that. It wasn't my thing.
Yeah. That's so cool though. I love hearing from people that didn't actually go to school for marketing, which I think is like usually the norm. Somehow we all kind of fall into this
Yeah.
or it's aligned with one of our like, what our actual passion is. So
Mhm.
it just kind of makes sense to go into marketing. So yeah, that's super
Yeah, it's
cool.
interesting. I mean, I would say back in the day, you probably were looking at more advertising and like traditional
Mhm.
like print marketing and things like that. And then I think for my I'm an elder millennial. I'll throw that out there. Um, I think for a lot of us, it was kind of a shift on like you didn't really. I mean, at least for me, I didn't go to school to become anything. I went because I was
Yeah.
told I had to go for insurance.
Yeah. I was told the
I was
same
like, okay, I have to go
thing.
to get my insurance, so I'll
Yeah.
go. But I don't really
Mhm.
want to be here. And I mean, it took me a minute to get through a 2-year program just because I
Yeah.
changed what I wanted. I mean, I was in like nursing, science and math, but I thought, and then like needles, and I don't know what I was
Yeah.
thinking then, like 19. So it's like, I'll be a
That's so
nurse. None of
that's
the
so
things
far
that
that's
like
so
I
different.
wanted to do, like you would start
Mhm.
to like learn about what it required, and you'd be like, oh, I'm not good at tea.
I
What
guess
they work what
uh,
kind of
right.
hours? No, I don't think I want to
Yeah.
do that.
No. Yeah.
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 I went through a lot of like careers that like just bounced around because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I think even I mean, even coming out of high school, I was in journalism, newspaper, all those things, creative things, photography
Mhm.
in high school. And I think a lot of people just said, well, you're going to become like either a broadcast journalist or a newspaper journalist. And in my head, I
Right.
had it where like, I don't want to write obituaries though. Like I thought, I don't know, because you're a
Right.
kid and you just think like, well, I'm going to go to
Right.
college, I'm going to become a journalist, and then they're going to make me write obituaries. No, I think that actually sounds like a really cool thing to do because that's like, think of the stories you tell
Right. You're telling a
in
story.
writing, obituaries and life moments, but at 18, 17, whatever, it was like,
Right. You're not
that's
really
not
interested
I
in
said,
that.
"That's
The
not
end of the
really," and I
road.
knew I didn't wanna be on TV either,
Mhm.
even
Right.
before I knew I was anxious. I was like, "Yeah, I don't think I wanna be on TV every
Mhm.
day. Yeah, that doesn't
No.
look like something I wanna do." And so, yeah, and I mean, I had always had an interest in photography, but again, you're looking that's 20 plus years ago. Everything digital wasn't really a thing. It was, but it was very expensive. And so for a long time, I didn't want to do that professionally either until digital became more affordable and I was able to jump in on that for a little bit. But yeah, for the longest time, I was just like, I have no idea what the heck I'm gonna do.
Do you
Yeah.
think that oh, go ahead, Hannah. Oh, I was gonna say one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was from my younger brother. And he was like, "What do you wanna be when you grow up? Or what do you wanna do when you go to college?" And I was like, "I have no idea." And he was like, "Well, what do you not wanna do?" And that really, like, narrowed it
Oh.
down for me.
Yeah.
I was like, "Can't do blood, can't do needles." I like working with people that are my age. So, I mean, it was like, that really helps, and I feel like through all your experiences, it kind of like, we start off with, like, this huge, like, open funnel, but the more you try things, the skinnier that path gets, and so,
Yeah.
yeah, talking about it now, I do think writing obituaries would be an honor, but
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
don't
You
think
don't think
about that
about
when you're
that. No.
younger. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't even think I had an idea of what I wanted to write at
Mhm.
17. Like
Right, yeah.
again, you think you're the oldest you've ever been at 17, but you still
Right.
have no idea,
Like, the
looking
life
back,
experience
know.
isn't there yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I look back even 10 years ago, I'm like, "Oh, that Casey knew nothing."
Do you think the kind of, bouncing around and like trying to figure out what am I going to do? I don't know what I want to do. Like, do you think that kind of added to some of the anxiety and just kind of like that's probably there for, a lot of us going through that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I will say, like, I took one of those, what is it? It's like like, it was a proctored test, the personality test, you know?
Oh, like
Uh,
16
like,
personalities,
yeah, like I think
right?
it was
The
Myers-Briggs,
Riot Act.
something like that, yeah.
Mhm.
And I took it through, like, my college courses, and I was all excited because I was gonna take this test, which I'm not a test taker, don't like tests. And there was gonna be a lady, she came in, she's gonna tell me what I was gonna be. And I could go major in that thing and we could just be done with this and I could get through college and go live my life. And she came in and she read everyone's answers, and every kid in this class got a nice lawyer, doctor, teacher, nurse. And she got to me and I was the last one and she said, "You're gonna have a problem." And I was like,
Uh-oh.
well, shoot.
I mean,
Not how I saw that one going. She
you were
said,
ready for your
You're interested in too
answer.
many things. You'll never settle on one thing, and that is gonna be both your blessing and your curse." And she wasn't wrong. Again, like, I think I was probably had to be close to 20, 21 at that time.
Yeah.
I was so mad at her, though, because I was like, I paid for you to do me.
Tell me the
Go
one
be a
thing.
teacher. Do
Uh,
the thing."
mm,
Um but she gave me the answer that I already knew, which was, I am interested in too many things. I do like dabbling and tinkering, and again, I think back then, though, there's especially then, it's gotten better in recent years, but there was such like this, you'll never make money being a photographer. You'll never make money being a writer. You'll never be
yeah.
successful
Yeah.
doing creative work, whether that's acting or like any of that, right? Like, it takes you have to like win the lottery to become a successful creative. And so they try and talk you out of it every step of the way, you know? And so I'm kind of glad she didn't give me an answer because it would have wasted a lot of money going and doing that thing, and I probably would have been miserable. So, I mean, it was tough because I then had to just keep bouncing around. And even, I mean, I put, I think, 8 years, and that was probably around that time that I also started with my photography business, and the goal was always to take that full time. And then there came a time in life where that wasn't going to happen. And I had a lot of friends trying to talk me out of, like, going into social media because that was a new
Mm,
thing. And, what about the dream? What about
right.
the dream you've had for a decade to be a successful photographer? But at that point, I was so burnt out. I was so exhausted. Creatives don't get into business for business. They get into it because they like the photography or the writing, the
Right.
creative thing,
Right.
right? And so having to run a business and then also like negotiating with people on prices and like all, I was like, this sucks. I don't want to do
Yeah.
this. I don't want to do this for the
Yeah.
rest of my life and have to like negotiate what I'd already done the math. I knew what I had to make to
Mhm.
stay afloat, you know?
Right.
And so I have jokingly said I retired from photography, which some people think is like, "Oh, you made it you made it so you could retire." No, it failed. It didn't
I'm
work.
done.
So I
Oh.
retired from it. I left, sold off all my equipment because I needed the
Oh,
money at
wow.
the time. And, truthfully, like, the cameras I had back then were so heavy. I am not
Mhm.
a big person. I'm 5'4", And so, like, lugging all of that around was painful, literally. And I just kinda was like, this isn't. It was the moment that, like, I was like, "The dream can change." Like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
can have a different dream, right? You could be doing something for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and then
Mhm.
decide, "I don't want that anymore."
Yeah.
And
Totally.
so you can go do something else. The nice thing being a creative is I've got a lot of things in my bag that I can pull out.
You can pull out of.
You need a writer, I'll be a writer.
Yeah.
You need a photographer, I'll be a photographer. You need social media, I got that. Like,
Yeah. I love that. I'm curious,
that's
Casey.
awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome. I'm curious what your advice would be now if you were talking to someone or if or Mia or myself asked you like, I don't know what I want to do. What should I do? Like, what would your advice be based on your experience?
I mean, I think a lot of it, I've had people say to me in the years, like, "Oh, it must be nice having something you're passionate about." and something you get to do, like, and be passionate about.
Mhm.
It is nice, right? Like, there isn't anything else I'd rather be doing. I think it's also where I struggle in being a true marketer. I will fight people that I'm not actually a true marketer. I'm a storyteller. I'm a really good storyteller, and that's where you tend to put me in marketing or brand because where else are you going to put me, first of all? But that's where we align, right? But to my core, I'm a storyteller. That's what I call myself. But it took a very long time and a lot of trial and error and a lot of just not listening to people, which is
Yeah.
really tough when, especially when you're young.
Yeah.
I had a guy, I would do this thing when I was in college where I would take semesters off because I just hated school and I just didn't want to be there, and it was expensive and he was
Yeah.
paying all this money to
I
be
took
somewhere I don't want to
semesters
be,
off
and,
too. Yeah.
it just didn't seem ideal. So I'd take semesters off, and I had this older guy that when I worked at Universal, he was like, "Oh, if you quit, you'll never go back." I was like, "Well, one, I didn't quit. I took a semester off. Those are 2 different things. And 2, like, hearing those voices aren't helpful, right? Like, a
Yeah.
lot of the societal voices aren't helpful. I think they come from a good place, but they're not helpful. And so, a lot of me wishes I would have taken a lot of that money from, like, my college, however much I spent on that, and just, like, traveled and did things, and went in. I remember sitting in, like, a humanities class, and they were talking about, Greek mythology and all I was like, "I wanna go see that, and I wanna learn
Yeah.
about book," And I kinda wish I had been a little gutsier back then and sort of been like, "I'm taking another semester off, and I'm gonna go travel. I'm gonna go see the Greek
Yeah.
mythology buildings and, like, all the things that I'm gonna go see those things," right?
Mhm.
I will get there someday, but I
I
wish I
will.
would have done that when I was younger,
Yeah.
and really traveled a lot more, and you have to find yourself in a lot of that. And you kind of didn't like, I mean, we've said it here already, like, you tend to just fall into what you're gonna do, you know?
Yeah.
There was no social media when I was in college. There was no
Right.
courses in that, that Facebook and Twitter and Instagram did none of that existed. So,
Right.
um and then when it did exist, nobody knew what to do with it,
Right.
so we had to figure out what to do with it. So who's to say in 20 years or 10 years, the thing that you're meant to do might not exist right. You
Yeah.
can't go to
Yeah.
college for something that doesn't exist. Um,
Totally.
so I think just having awareness that there are like, there's not a linear structure, right? There's not a checklist.
Mhm.
There's not a ladder.
Mhm.
I would tell my team this all the time. Like, don't worry about the latter. Like, you put so much emphasis on, like, you're doing this one thing now, and so in 6 months or a year or 3, you have to take the next role. No, you don't actually. But
Yeah.
if you're happy doing what you're doing, you don't have to lead people. You don't have to become a manager. If you want to do it,
Yeah.
great, but you don't have to.
Right. I love
That's a
that.
thing they've put in your head that
Yeah.
you've
They're
got
like,
to
gotta
follow
go
the
to the next
structure.
step. Mhm.
Yeah.
So you actually I loved what you said about how society will, kind of like plant things in your ear, especially as a young person. And it's not always helpful because there's not one size fits all answer to these things. And it just kind of made me think of being a creative in the corporate world. And maybe you have to, fight back against what the, C suite wants, that they're not creative storytellers, but they hired you for this reason to be the creative storyteller, and et cetera. And I was just curious, like, what has your experience been like as a creative in the corporate world as far as doing the job that they hired you for? But also, I also love your comment about you don't have to climb the corporate ladder. So, multiple questions there, but
Yeah.
go for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is, it's tricky, right? Because you're
Mhm.
hired to do this thing that you're more than likely clearly an expert on. You've been doing it a while, you've done it well. You're still going to have people challenge you on it. You're still
Yeah.
going to have people question you on it. Everyone with an Instagram account thinks they know Instagram. And so they're going to come to you and say, just post this photo. And it's a crappy photo. And you're just going to be like, no. I think that's something that, like, I've had and this is something I was not really good at, and I just kind of, at some point you do just kind of have to own it, especially when you work in, I will say, in brand specifically. you
Mhm.
kind of become known as like the brand police because you say no a lot and people think you're just being a pain in the neck and just saying no to say no. And it's like, no, I'm saying it so we don't get sued. No, or I'm
Yeah.
saying it so we don't get a cease and desist letter. Like nobody wants to be on the cease and desist letter list.
Right.
And so a lot of times it's a protective thing, right? And it's just having to tweak how you say things and how you present them. But you're always going to have that
Yeah.
challenge. You're always going to
Yeah.
have people that don't get it because they're
Yep.
not creatives. They're not storytellers. They don't think it sells. They don't think they can get anything from it, right? The turnaround on that is that so I'm not a numbers person, most creatives are. But the great thing about numbers is that they can tell stories. And
Yeah.
so that's how I always tell my creative teams to like, don't shy away from the metrics because they're numbers and they're scary. And obviously they either show success or not. Right. So that's a scary thing. But you can get them to tell the story you need. So you can get them to say, here's why this worked. Here's the number behind it. And here's why we need to do more of it. Or here's why I need budget to do more of this. Or
Right.
this
Mhm.
didn't work. I put up that crappy photo on Instagram and look, our engagement tanked because everyone agreed with me.
Yeah.
Um, and nobody liked it. And so we need to do less of that. So you can
Right.
kind of tinker with that in kind of use it to either get access to different things or shy away from things that you kind of know we should be doing.
Yeah.
So for me, it's really kind of gaming the system a little bit,
Mhm.
which is kind of fun, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, I'll always try. I could be wrong, right? Maybe the crappy photo does well. I don't know. Like let's put it up and see what it does. But if it tanks, I'm going to show you the numbers, and we're not going to do that again. Because
Yeah.
now I have the data behind it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think as creatives, you just kind of have to know that people are always going to challenge you. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of times people just think they can, even when I was a photographer, right? You would have Uncle Joe standing there with his iPad
Right.
thinking he's going to get the best photo of the day. And you just have to, then it's so, okay, we'll just
Yeah.
ignore him. I'm going to get my shots. We're going to shoot around him so he's not in the frame. So it does make you creative in the
Mhm.
how to survive corporate
Totally.
world, right?
Yeah.
And I've had conversations where other creatives kind of almost they'll throw, well, you sold out. You went you went to corporate, that kind of, you're not living the true creative sort of
Starving
way.
artist. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I wanted a 401k. I wanted a financial, future. I did not want to own my own business. So
Right.
I
That's
had to
what
go
it
work for
is.
someone else.
If Yeah.
Um,
anything, I feel like that's just creatively, I don't know, being able to find a corporate job or selling out to
mhm.
corporate. That's not a bad decision, especially if you're doing
No.
work you want and it supplies the work you want to do outside of it. It's crazy too. I just thought back to when you said like people were saying, "Oh, creatives don't make money, artists don't make money." There are people that get paid for that. So, it's not true, but also I don't think working in corporate is selling out because I have not lost a drop of creativity
No.
working in corporate and I have a 401k. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think for every role that I've had in
Mhm,
probably at least the last decade, every time I took those roles, I was terrified I was going to be losing the creative
mhm,
thing I used to do or still want to do every single time. And
mhm.
none of them have taken any of that away. When I started at Cisco, I thought, oh, photography is, not going to be a thing here. They had me running their Instagram. Like, I started their Instagram account. Like, what is, but
Wow.
that's
Yeah,
because of photography, right? Like,
right.
because I had that eye. That was sort of just, it was something I had in my back pocket, that a lot of people that I was competing with for those jobs didn't have. I had that photography background that could tell that story visually and
Mhm.
translate it. And then I'm also a writer. So you put those things together and they kind of come, full circle. And brands need storytelling, you know.
Yeah,
Mhm. They do.
absolutely.
They need creatives. They can't function without creatives either. So
I
Totally.
agree. As you were talking, I kind of thought creativity is where you are. If you go there, it's going to be creative. We have the opportunity to bring that to the roles that we have. So I think that's super cool. And it's cool that you kind of had a leg up with your photography skill. So for the people
Especially
who say things like, why are you doing that? It doesn't matter. I got my first content writing job without ever, I had a personal blog, and
Mhm.
that's why I got the
Yeah.
job. No
I
one
mean,
else hired
that's
me
why
before that
personal
moment.
branding is so
Yeah.
invaluable, right? Like, that to me, when I got that very first social media job, I was selling insurance at the time, which
Mhm.
I was not selling any
Oh, I
insurance.
can't even see you doing that.
It was painful. I sat in my car and cried a lot, a lot.
Oh,
I got yelled at a lot. It was a terrible
oh
job.
my god.
And so wasn't making ends meet, like financially just
Wow.
destroyed. It was a very, very low part of my
Mhm.
life, you know? And I knew I couldn't sell insurance because I was terrible. Not a salesperson. On top of that. And so I applied for that social media job kind of on a whim. And there were people that, like I had this is now a no-no, but back then, a while ago, like I had my headshot like on my resume. My resume was a more creative, it had color, it wasn't black and white.
Yeah.
It was me, it was my
Right.
personal brand. It had the social media logo so that you could visibly see very quickly who I was, what I did, where you could find me. And that landed me the job, you know, because on a sea of white and black, you could see me in the middle there. And obviously now I don't have my headshot on my resume anymore. Don't do that
Yeah.
because it's now we've done it. But back then,
Not anymore.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was really just a lot of times I have to, I mean, to this day, because there are still voices in my head that say, you're not good enough. You can't do this. This is, what are you doing? They're going to find out. You don't know what you're doing. And most of the time, anytime I get that way, it's just, I have to do this the Casey way. Like, there's only one way that I can
Mm,
do something, that I can
I
show
love
up,
that.
and it gets me out of that, like, you hit like that kind of hurdle of being in your head,
Yeah.
and the world is gonna know, and they're gonna, think I'm an idiot, and they're gonna think this sucks. And when I sit down and just go, okay, just do this the way you know how, just get it out. Just
Yeah.
figure it out, like do it the Casey way and then go from there. Then you can tinker with it and mess with it and make it better or make it more them if it's a different brand or whatever. That at least just gets me out of my own way. So that's always helpful too. Um,
I love that.
but you
I feel like
you have to get
oh,
back
go
on like your own, like your personal brand. I mean, even in this 7 months I was interviewing, there were definitely times where I was just like, this, I'm not doing this. Obviously, because I need a job, but I was just like, this is the worst. You have people who just met you, weighing in on you, all these ridiculous things. I had people ask me where my 4-year degree was. And I'm like,
that science doesn't even matter anymore. What about
it
my 10
doesn't.
plus years
Um,
experience of actual work?
yeah, especially in that particular role was in employer branding and talent branding and things that I've done very recently,
Yeah.
relatively well known for, And she's asking me for
Not all the
my
best
degree.
candidates go to school.
School is
Yeah.
expensive. It was expensive when I went. It is very expensive now. So if you're gonna pass up on talking to someone because they don't have a 4-year. I mean, to be honest, I don't want to work anywhere that's like that either.
Exactly.
If you're gonna weigh on that, I'm honestly glad I didn't go to a 4-year. I went to a 2-year. It
Yeah.
took a long time. I got enough debt, even just doing
No.
that. And by the time I got to that point, I was just like, there's no point for me to go to a 4-year because I'm already doing everything I'd go that. Like I was
Yeah.
already writing, I was already being published. I already own my own photography business. Like, why would I go to another
Wow.
2+ years of school for them
Yeah.
to tell me I'm either doing it right or I'm doing it wrong? Like,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah. I took a couple of so I tried going to school for marketing and I ended up changing to writing just to get a freaking degree. And I loved writing. I mean, I love writing. I think I'm okay at it. But I started
Yeah.
in marketing and I couldn't do it because accounting classes
Mhm.
awful. And then I took a couple like just beginner advertising, general education classes. And we learned all about print advertising.
Mhm.
And but that but that was really like a point where that's not really a thing so much
No.
anymore. I wanted to go into marketing because I wanted to go into social media and
Mhm.
websites and like
Yeah.
apps and that kind of
Digital
thing
marketing.
and digital marketing. And that's why I
Marketing for
put
2023. Yes.
yes. So I put digital marketing in front of everything whenever I
Mhm.
tell people I'm a marketer
Yep.
because if I did go to school for advertising, I don't know if they would have taught anything at that time that was, like,
Mhm.
relevant in today's marketing world.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
I
it's
really
interesting.
probably not. College is great. Everyone should go if you
Yes,
can. Stay in
college is
school,
good.
had I gone to school 20 plus years ago for any of that, chances
Yeah,
are what would have been there or would have been taught probably isn't relevant
right.
anymore. And then on the other side, the other stuff didn't exist. You couldn't
Right.
have taught me about Instagram because it was 10 years before Instagram existed or whatever it was. Yeah, it
Right.
was almost 10 years before she was doing the math.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I studied communications I got my bachelor's in communication studies. The school I went to didn't have a marketing degree, but when I was a little kid, even in high school, I wasn't like, "I wanna be a marketer." That just
Nobody
wasn't
does.
anything I thought about. I wanted to be, like every little girl, a marine biologist,
Mhm.
or there's a lot of girls who wanted to be that.
I also wanted to be
But
a marine biologist too until I realized how much
what it
science is
actually
involved in
means.
that.
Yeah, I just wanted to swim with the
Truthfully,
dolphins.
I wanted to be a Shamu trainer. That was like my
Yeah.
in my head, I was gonna train Shamu and save all the animals. And then I don't like deep water. I don't like cold, deep water. I
Yeah.
also don't like large marine life in the water.
But we had I got my minor in public relations, and a majority of the classes we had one class called New Media and PR, and we learned a little bit about Facebook. Um, we had to make a slideshow or a deck with recommended posts for a client, like an imagined client. That was it. That was what we did.
That's
That
the
was as much
yeah.
digital marketing, and we learned so much about media kits and press releases, and I've made 3 media kits now, and they're all on the Google Drive. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That stuff isn't physical anymore, so I definitely think if you wanna be a doctor or a lawyer, you should probably go to school.
Yes, anyone.
Yeah, please. But if you wanna be in marketing, I genuinely don't think that it's or creative, like, going to
Yeah.
college is not gonna teach you how to be creative. It might give you
Mhm.
some critical thinking, which is important, but yeah, I would definitely, you know, I don't know. If you're gonna be a marketer, I think you just have to prove that you can do it and then have
Mhm.
a good chance where someone believes in you. And they're like, "Okay, like, I'll hire you." And then you
Yeah.
can prove yourself from there.
A lot of I mean, and a lot of that goes back to personal branding too. It's just
Mhm, yeah.
the more you can kind of build up your own brand, the more it
Mhm.
shows. I mean, that's how I got a lot of jobs early on was my personal brand, the pages that
I'm
were already there, you know. It's why I have a dog Instagram account.
I have a cat
It is.
Instagram.
It's
I'm
a good way
curious,
to try
Casey.
test things out and see if they're working, you
Yeah.
know. Um,
I'm curious, Casey. Everyone talks about personal branding, and I know I have a personal brand whether I'm actively working on it or not. But my question is, since you've been a creative director, you've overseen marketing campaign for your personal brand, do you, and this is going to sound funny, but just applying my marketing brain, do you create your message and your vision? You know how when we create like all of that, I'm just curious. Well, because when people talk about their
yeah.
personal brand, I'm like, do you have like what's the word I'm looking for? What's like the
Like a
document that
SWOT
has
analysis?
all of the branding in it? Like a
Oh,
guide? What are
like
those
a
things
brand
called?
guideline type
Yes,
thing? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the word.
Yeah. I don't have that actual doc. No. Like I don't have a mission statement. I think those are probably things like I've taken workshops and stuff like that. And I'll throw stuff down on the paper and like, yeah, it's a good sentence that captures who I am in 30 seconds. I don't really love the whole 30-second pitch. Like 30
Oh,
seconds, 30
yeah.
seconds for me, like it's kind of like the one-page resume, especially the longer you've been doing this, like the more implausible that becomes. Uh,
Yeah.
so my resume is 2 pages.
As it
It's
should
pretty
be.
easy.
Yeah.
And a lot of what's on there is the personal stuff, right? Like it
Mhm.
is my dogs are on there, their account, and the therapy work that I do. So volunteer work. Same with St. Baldrick's. I didn't
That's
raise
amazing.
$150,000 for children's cancer research by doing nothing. Yeah.
Right.
So whether you ask me about it or
Those
not,
are
I'm probably
great.
going to talk about it. And a lot of that is marketing and branding and storytelling
It
and social
is.
media.
Yeah.
And it is what I do professionally, just used for a greater good.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a like a guideline that I go back to. That's that's here, you know. So
You are the
it
guidebook.
goes back to the anytime I hit that hurdle or I stumble, you do kind of just have to sit and go, sit with yourself and go like, okay, who am I? How am I showing up? Like, um, how do I want people to know or remember me? Right.
Mhm.
Um, And that to me is also like when people ask about like career aspirations and climbing the ladder and none of that's going to matter at the end of your life. Like
Right.
not a second of any of you've done for the most part professionally is going to matter. You're never going to wish you worked more, you know.
Right.
You're never
Right.
going to be laying there going like, you know what I would have loved to have worked 80 hours a week. It,
Mhm. Yeah.
um Or I would have loved to have led a team of 20, you know? Maybe you do, maybe you
Right.
don't. Maybe you're just like, "No, that sounds awful." Um,
Yeah.
so for me, it just kind of going back to my roots and who I am and, for even I mean, I obviously just lived this whole, like, interview cycle thing, but even going through that and, like, muting my hair colors a little bit. Yeah.
Oh
'Cause I
no.
didn't know who now I'll say this is kind of semi-intentional because Halloween is coming up, so
Right.
there's stuff coming, but yeah, even, like, as the purple would fade, like, letting it go a little longer if I had, like, a certain interview or
Mm.
although just recently, as in, like, 6 weeks ago, I had someone, they're like, "No, to make that vibrant purple." It's like, let
That's
them
who you
do it,
are. Yeah.
which is good, like, I needed those are the things I needed
Right.
to hear. Everyone needs the, like, reminders of, like, no, keep showing up like who you are, because
Exactly.
someone is going to find that and go, "Yes, this is the
Yeah.
person,"
That's exactly what we want. Mhm.
Yeah. And that's literally what just happened with my new job, you know?
Yeah.
There was no hurdles to jump over or any of that. It's like they found me, they knew they'd been looking for me. They got me in 3 interviews in 3 days and made an offer on
Oh
the
my
day,
gosh, that's great.
you know? Which
That's
just goes to show
good.
you too that like all the 7 interviews and the projects and you don't need those either.
It's just not necessary. Yeah.
Really not.
Oh my gosh. I love what you said about personal branding. That's always been something that is very interesting to me as I'm trying to figure out like how do you put your personal brand together and stay professional in the corporate world when I'm just not really a professional kind of gal,
I
but
was gonna say, even the word professional is a little I would have I mean, like, I've had
yeah,
people fight me on the whole, like, purple hair thing, like, "Well, that's not very professional." Like, "Well, that's a dumb word." Like, "What do you mean?
yeah,
What is professional?" Like, I
right.
come in, I
And
show
I
up
do
on
my work.
set, do my work, I do a great job, ain't nobody complaining about my results.
Right.
Uh, what does the purple hair have to do with it? In fact, I'd
Yeah.
argue it makes me better because it makes me
Yes.
more of who I am. So
And
like, I'm
I
not
love
having to,
that.
like, form into the mold of what, like, a company wants me to be. I just am who I am, you know?
Lately, I love that you said that. Lately, I've been practicing what I'm calling imperfection. And so in those moments, like before a Zoom call or when I have to like get on a call, maybe I don't do my makeup or my hair or whatever because I always look like I take showers. Like I'm a clean person. But you didn't hire me Like, I do a lot of client-facing work, so I
Mhm.
always present well for that. But when it's, like, an internal meeting or a strategy session, like, you didn't hire me because of what I look like, I
Mhm.
hope. Like, you hired me because of my brain and
Yeah,
the
'cause you're
skills.
talented. Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
like, so I've just been trying to focus on that because I think so often society is like, you have to be not only a good marketer, you also have to, like, look clean and have
Mhm.
brown or neutral hair. Like, that doesn't affect how good
It's,
of a campaign I
I
can
mean,
do.
that goes into being a woman in the space too,
Yeah.
and how you look and how you're
Mhm.
put together and that kind of thing.
Oh,
Um,
we could have a whole episode on
yeah, I
that.
was gonna say that's a black thing. Like, I don't know.
Case in part two.
We
I got
jump into
therapy
that,
in
but
5 minutes. I don't got yeah.
this wasn't
Oh,
therapy
well.
enough.
I know, right? Well, I'm so glad that we got to have you on the show. I loved hearing
Mm,
about your take on personal branding. I think, you have all the words of wisdom that I always try to, like, soak in and learn from you. So thank you so much for being on the show,
thank you
Casey,
for having
and congratulations on your new position. We're so
me.
excited for you.
So excited.
And yes, and if you want to find Casey online, you can find her Casey Shimansky on LinkedIn. And if you wanted to name your Instagram handles or Twitter or anything,
Yeah,
Casey.
all of my other handles are at the name is Casie, Casie for the Casey part of it. And the dogs are at positive pointers. Positive pointers.
Positive.
I need to
Perfect.
I need to follow them right now. If you aren't following the Anxious Marketers, you can follow us on Instagram and
Oh,
listen
right.
to us on YouTube and Spotify and Apple if that's your thing. But again, Casey, thank you so much for having this conversation with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. See you guys next time. Bye.